This is the Jocko Underground Podcast number 45 with Echo Charles sitting across the table from me. And just to give a little bit of just some perspective that we were talking about to everyone. Right now, the date is the 18th of March. And looking at the war as it unfolds in Ukraine. And one of the things that I just wanted to bring a sort of very ground level tactical view to is, well, the way I think there's some things that are going to have a big impact on that war. One of them is snipers. And the reason I bring this up is because snipers, which in Task Unit Bruiser we used very effectively against the enemy in Iraq, the psychological impact of snipers cannot be overstated. It is a massive psychological impact. We certainly got reports from the enemy. You know, we would intercept reports, or we'd gather human intelligence that would say that the enemy, the insurgents in Ramadi, were horrified of snipers. And what makes it so horrifying is that I guess it's almost the there's an equivalency between a sniper and a roadside bomb, in that you're just minding your own business. You're doing your bad guy stuff. You're out there doing your bad guy stuff, and you think you're going to get away with doing your bad guy stuff, and you're not scared of anyone because you kind of operate without any fear, because you don't see any American forces around. You're just out there being a bad guy. Maybe you're with your buddy, and you're out there doing bad guy stuff. You're digging a hole in the road, or you're maneuvering to a fighting position or whatever, and all of a sudden your friend's head just disappears. And you don't know how it happened. You don't know where. You didn't hear a boom, right?
So you don't hear the gunshot.
You may or may not.
Yeah.
Depending on how far you are, or maybe you hear it a second later or 2 seconds later. And then you look to respond, and you don't see anything. You know what you see is you see windows. So imagine you're walking down the street. Imagine you're walking down the street in San Diego. In downtown San Diego. You've been to downtown San Diego. You worked at the bar, right?
Yep, that's true.
So imagine you're standing out in front of your bar in San Diego. You're being your bouncer, right?
Sure.
And imagine how many windows and doorways can you see?
Yeah, thousands.
Yeah. It might be thousands, right?
It's more than thousands.
Probably
it's like maybe 10,000. Given, 10,000.
Because the angles, it may not be. It's not infinite, but there is a very large number. Because it's not just the building across the street or the next building down or the next. It's like 6 buildings down.
More than that. It's every building you can see.
It's every building you can see.
Yeah.
And the rooftop and the windows. So now imagine that the previous day when you were doing your bouncing job, you were standing out there with your friend Fred, and all of a sudden Fred's head just disappeared. Yeah. And now it's the next day and you're going to work. How do you feel?
Yeah.
You're not going to feel good about that.
No.
So we would hear those reports when we were in Ramadi of fear, psychological fear. Also, there were some what we called enemy sharpshooters. So we didn't call them snipers because they weren't like fully capable snipers, but there were some damn good shots, and they made some shots. And we would hear about those in the whole area of operations. Like, for instance, here's one report that started coming down, was that there was an enemy sharpshooter that was shooting and aiming for the groin. That's what he was aiming for. And so this was like, just to give that psychological fear. There was these weird stories about like Chechen snipers. So now you're thinking, this is the person that's been trained for this kind of thing. So I think that, the Ukrainians have very good actual snipers, and it is taking a toll on the Russians. And here's the thing, from a, I started off by saying like, hey, I want to bring this down to a tactical perspective. But now I want to think about this from a strategic perspective. If you've got 100 snipers, you got 100 snipers, and each one of your snipers is killing 3 a day, 3 enemy a day. Now you've got a friendly force or whatever force is losing 300 people a day just from sniper shots that they can't react to, they don't know how to defend against. So 300 people a day. That turns into a real problem for any military. So as I've been watching this thing unfold in Ukraine, I think that's going to leave a mark. And then on top of that, we have these anti-tank weapons. They have these anti-tank weapons. The anti-tank weapons, this is another psychological thing, because as a tanker, a young tanker, what are you thinking? When you get into a tank, you think you're getting into a place that no one can touch you, no one can bother you. You're good to go. Mm-hmm. Now, I never had this feeling. When I was in the back of tanks, when I was in the back of, I was in the back of Bradleys. But getting into a Bradley, I definitely didn't feel like, oh, I'm untouchable, because Bradleys were getting blown up and destroyed, and it was vicious to die inside of a Bradley. So I never felt any level of comfort when I was getting into a Bradley fighting vehicle to transit somewhere in Ramadi. Why is that? Well, it's because I had seen Bradleys get blown up and seen the damage that it caused and seen the people get killed in those. So let's say you're a young Russian tanker and you've trained and you literally go out and you drive over vehicles and it's cool and you can't hear anything in there because it's such a big, giant, metal, awesome machine. And you're thinking, hey, the Ukrainians don't even have, they got limited tanks, so we're just going to kind of dominate. Mm. So now the first day goes by and all of a sudden you hear rumors, right? Hey, wait, they have some kind of anti-tank weapons. They're shooting our tanks and it's destroying our tanks, killing the guys inside. And how many tanks got knocked out? And all of a sudden it's like 7, 12, 14 tanks. And now all of a sudden, instead of you feeling indestructible, you feel absolutely vulnerable. Mm. And between just those two things, just between the snipers and the anti-tank weapons that are being used, both of those are being used very effectively. I think that Russia did not anticipate this type of warfare. I don't think they're ready for this type of warfare. I don't think it's psychologically easy for them to take. And I think it is going to, I think the Russia's in for a rude awakening. I think the morale of the troops is very, very low right now. Of course, some of that's propaganda. I get it. But even just seeing what's happening, I know the morale is low. I know it's low. You can't take that many casualties and not have your morale start to dip. Especially because you're not seeing even where this is coming from. You're getting sniped. And that tells you that we're exposed. Guess what else it tells you? It tells you that you're fighting a highly trained enemy. And that's a scary, scary thing. It's a scary, scary thing. When you're you're in a bar, yeah, and somebody, bumps into you or whatever, and you like, hey, what's your problem? And they go into like a legitimate fight stance. you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Like
instantly, oh, this dude trains. So it went from, hey, I'm Echo and I'm kind of tough and I'm going to jack this dude up to, oh man. And then imagine what, so he goes into like a legitimate fight stance, hands up, he's kind of looking light on his feet and you're like, oh, I wasn't anticipating this. Yep. And then you like take a swing at him and he just like slips and cracks you again. Mm. And so you're a little bit stunned and you realize you just messed with someone that's well-trained. Yeah. That's the psychological, especially when you fought, like the guy looked kind of dumpy and you kind of like, you're kind of jacked. So you're like, hey, this isn't going to be that much of a match for me. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Hey, if you were going if someone was like, hey, Echo, this guy's a fighter, you need to go fight him. And so you were going in with that attitude, you'd be like, okay, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
That was Russia wasn't like, hey, we're going against trained fighters. We're going to go and kick their ass. We're big, we're strong. So psychologically, it's much more difficult. So even as a coach, I don't say, hey, man, you're going to run through this guy. I don't say that, because if it doesn't happen, we're going to have problems. Well, guess what the Russians have been thinking for the last 5 years? We're going to run through these Ukrainians. That's what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. And now when it doesn't happen, you got a psychological situation to deal with. And it is hard to deal with. And this is unfortunate. I think there's going to be a lot of brutality. I think there's going to be some... That is a little excerpt of what we are doing on the Jocko Underground podcast. So if you want to continue to listen, go to jockounderground.com and subscribe. And we're doing this to mitigate our reliance on external platforms so we are not subject to their control. And we're doing it so we can give you more control, more interaction, more direct connections, better communications with us, strengthen this legion of troopers that are in the game with us. So thank you. It's jockounderground.com. It costs $8.18 a month. And if you can't afford to support us, we can still support you. Just email assistance@jockounderground.com and we'll get you taken care of. Until then, we will see you mobilized underground.